On behalf of the Africa Institute in Sharjah, UAE, I'm really pleased to welcome our guests and to welcome all attendees from across the world for our last webinar of this year or this season. We do have one more event, which is the anniversary of the concert of the Sudanese singer and musician Muhammad Al-Amin, which will be on December 12th. Today's webinar concludes 4 days of live streaming of 2 films of Idrissou Mora Kpai films, America Street, which is from 2019, a very recent film, which is the most recent one of his films, and also Indochina, Traces from a Mother, the film from 2011. Idrissou is an assistant professor in the Department of Media, Art and Sciences at Ithaca College, and he's an award-winning filmmaker whose films have been screened worldwide. This film has been available, and I think today is the last one, the last day, has been available for free streaming via the Africa Institute website. We are happy to host Idrissou, who is a filmmaker from Benin, who is now based in Ithaca, New York, in the US, in the United States, who will be in conversation with Carina, who is a professor of history and African American studies at Brandeis University. I will introduce both of them briefly, but I want to say just a few words about the 2 films, which I think Idrissou can tell us more. That America Street, his most recent film, is set in Charleston East Side neighborhood, which is a predominantly Black neighborhood that has been gentrified and somewhat represent a disappearing Black American community due to what we know now as a very well-known phenomenon in urban areas of the US, which is gentrification. That is why white moving middle class, upper middle class moving in, and Blacks moving out, which focus on Joe, a character with the name Joe, who is the owner of a small corner store at the heart of an old community in Charleston. The second film is Indochina, Traces of a Mother, is set historically, even though it's looked at the film itself, the setting from the present, but it's set historically between 1946, or at least it invoked events from between 1946 and 1954, when over 60,000 African soldiers that are recruited by the colonial forces, specifically the French in West Africa, who enlisted these people to fight the Viet Minh rebellion in Vietnam. So the film really reflects on the destiny when 2 colonized people meet in the battlefield and come into contact with each other, specifically when African soldiers took Vietnamese women as wives and had kids or mixed race kids from them, which is a story that extends to the present, and it represents, in a way, what we know now as the afterlife of colonialism. And it focuses on one character with the name Christophe, or Duck, as is known in the film by his Vietnamese name. Idrissou Mora Kpai, as I mentioned earlier, is an assistant professor in the Department of Media, Art, Sciences and Studies at Ithaca College, which is in Ithaca, New York. And he is an award filmmaker whose films have been definitely distributed or screened worldwide, as in Berlin, Rotterdam, Vienna, Milano, and many other international art festivals. Idrissou is from Benin, West Africa, who migrated to Germany, and then later on, as it is now, in the United States. And his documentaries mostly focus on the post-colonial conditions in African societies and issues of migrations and diaspora. his film, America Street, is his first really focus on the African American community, which becomes his larger community when he now migrated to the United States. He's a recipient of the Prince Claus Fund Award for his artistic achievement and dedication to social change in the Global South. Carina Ray is an associate professor of African American Studies and director of faculty mentoring at Brandeis University. She's a scholar of race, sexuality, comparative colonialism and nationalism, migration and maritime history, and the relationship between race, ethnicity, and political power. And that is where her research focused primarily in Ghana and its diaspora. So she's more really qualified than anybody to really focus on the issues of race, ethnicity, specifically in the context of Indochina film, but also in the larger diaspora as it's represented by the film America Street. And America Street, by the way, is a street in Charleston, South Carolina. She's the author of the award-winning book, Crossing the Color Line, Race, Sex, and the Contested Politics of Colonialism in Ghana, published in by Ohio University Press in 2015, and is a winner of several awards, including the American Historical Association Wesley Logan Book Prize in 2016, and the African Studies Association Aitu Snyder Book Prize in 2017. There is a lot on the biographies of both that you can find on our site. So let me just begin by asking the two to engage, and I here give the platform to Carina to start the conversation.
Thank you, Salah, and thanks to the Africa Institute for providing this opportunity for Idrissou and I to be in conversation with one another. So I should just say that, Idrissou's films have been very important to me as a scholar and teacher of African history for a very long time. I teach Indochine, Traces of a Mother in both my African history courses and in my race, sex, and colonialism course. I've also taught another film that I think I'll find a way of being able to weave into a question, Arlit de Duzem Perez, as well in a course that I teach on African cities as well. And so, his films have been with me for quite some time, and I always appreciate the opportunity to be in conversation with him, and also to have the opportunity for more people to learn about this incredible filmmaker and the range of different films that he's made. And this is where I would actually like to start the first question, which is actually not about the two films that were screened, but actually I would like Idrissou to just tell us a little bit about his first film, Sigirike, and to tell us just about the film, what motivated him to make this first film, because I want to ask a question about Indochine, Traces of a Mother in relationship to this film. And I think it's important that the audience understand a little bit about his first film. Idrissou.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Salah. Thank you, Carina. And thanks to the African Institute really for having me. To reply to your question, Sigirike was a very intimate film for me. It was the beginning of my career, actually. So that was my first film after film school. And we often talk about migration, in different, different domain of migration, but we don't talk about the contrary, going back home, right? So that's a kind of displacement also that need to be taught and analyzed, because the way the challenges are almost the same. It's like the other coin of other face of the coin, right? Going home could be also as difficult as going somewhere, migrants, to Europe. So this film was about my returning home after 10 years of presence in Europe. I've been in Europe for so many years. I haven't been at home, and the film is how I get home after this long time, and how I was experiencing the changes, right? Because the home, what I believe was my home, was not anymore that home I left, right? So I need to get to know it, to get to understand the meaning of this home, right? So that's what was, what motivated me to make this film, Sigari Kevekun Mora. But with also kind of, I was trying to emphasize also the role of women in my society, because growing up in a traditional society like Benin, I was not aware of the condition of women, particularly the condition of my own mother. So the film has as main character my mother, with whom I didn't have a close relationship. So I was getting to, to learn who she was really as a person, right? So that was what Sigariki was about.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it looked like you don't have your microphone. Yes, I thought you have a question. So.
Yeah, so the reason that I asked, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so the reason that I asked you to say a little bit about that is because when I look at Sigirike, and I look at Arlit, and I look at America Street, I can see clearly films that are in some ways, in part autobiographical, right? That are in some ways documenting your own experience. So in the case of Arlit, returning back to this town, which had been at the center of the uranium production in Niger, and then went into decline after the price of uranium busted, and becomes this really important node on the trans-Saharan migration of people coming from different West African countries trying to make it to North Africa and beyond, a place that you, on your own personal journey, pass through. And so going back and returning to this town, and then America Street, also being this deeply personal kind of encounter with this town that you found yourself living in, and trying to figure out, what the Black community was like there. And again, Joe being this really important node in that community. And so when I look at those films, and then I get to, then when I think about Indochine Traces of a Mother, there's a way in which it doesn't necessarily kind of fit into that trajectory. However, when I think about it in relation to Sigirike, I do see the way in which that film was this, you going back in search of your mom and finding a woman that was almost like a surprise to you. And then when I look at Indochine, I see you following another man's journey in search of his mother. So I wanted to see if you could talk about the two films in relationship to one another in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, for all my films, I think it's the more important, the very important aspect of all my films are displacement in different direction, right? Me, leaving Africa for Europe and coming back. And also in Indochina, we see also this aspect, displacement. We Africans who fought, moved from Africa to Asia. Christoph is torn between these three continents, right? We still see here also the displacement, he'd been taken back to Africa without his mother. And if you know the importance of mother, and it's really, for me, being that, as you said, as you mentioned before, the film, my first film, Sigari, was told around this, looking for my mother. I understood the suffering of kids, children like Christophe, and so many, Africa-wide, who have been taken to Africa without their mothers. Taking him back into China was important, was what drive my film. But not only that drive my film, but around all a structure of a film, we have so many stories. We have displacement, we have the colonial stories, we have also alienation, and we have people still fighting and fought and still fighting for the independence. In different continents, right? In Asia and in Africa, so justice here also taken another place here. What all of my film is also about: justice, looking for justice. And if we see, if I come back to America Street, it's also the central topic here is also about justice, looking for justice, searching for justice. And you also have displacement also in America Street. Displacement in the sense that if I'm talking about gentrification, I'm talking about people, families that have been stormed, separate, right? A community that was together has been separate, taken apart, right? The sense of home that is gone, right? So we still have that. I have it because it's home. We know, for all of us, home, how important home is. If you are a migrant, you know what home means. That is something that haunted us our entire life, because getting this sense of home somewhere else is difficult. You will never get it. Right? You will never get it. So it became a dream. It's become a dream for you. So that's also something that captured me when I came to Charleston. To see people who were together, who were trying to get together to create this a community, were not able because of this pressure that's come from outside, right? The capitalistic pressure that come up, that take them apart. So that was one of the motivation why I decided to make America Street, for instance.
So before, because I have a kind of comment and a question, one more question about Indochine. I think that when we get to America Street, I think we can talk for a very, very long time about the film, and I think there'll be lots of questions from the audience. But I do really feel that Indochine is a very, very important film. So I just want to talk a little bit more about it. So first the comment and then the question. So one of the things that I think is so brilliant about the film is that if you look at sort of maybe the last kind of 15, 20 years of both anthropological and historical scholarship on empire, there's been a lot of work which has looked at the relationship between sort of race and sexuality and empire, and particularly looking at how, different imperial powers were very invested in sort of controlling the intimate sphere of both colonial subjects and their own colonizing forces, right? And your work does something important to decenter this notion that the concern was only about, relationships between the colonized and the colonizer, right? You actually bring two colonized subjects together, and you look at what happens when they interact and the political power of that interaction, and the political being both kind of capital P politics. So in this film, we see how that encounter between West African conscripted. And I think that was another important point that many of your respondents said. It was like, you know, they said we were volunteers. Look, we were conscripted, right? And then, you know, looking at their encounter with Vietnamese freedom fighters, right? And the way in which that encounter really sparked a kind of anti-colonial sensibility, right? That they realized, you know, sort of why are we fighting to put down their freedom struggle? We want the very same thing. It really reminded me a lot of Muhammad Ali's sensibilities when he refused to, you know, serve in Vietnam, right? Yeah. So there's that kind of capital P politics that really comes forward in the film, but also the way in which the French were really intervening to kind of, at the micro level, to control these families, right? To say, you know, the Vietnamese women have to stay here, the men have to go. And interestingly enough, that the children, the progeny have to go too, right? And in fact, you know, so eager were they to basically get rid of these mixed race children that they sent many children with one man, right? It was like this way of just like, let's get rid of this problem. And that's where my question comes in. So, you know, we see Christophe, and Christophe is in many ways, you know, he exudes strength, right? I mean, you have this image of him coming out of the sea, and he's very strong, and you can see that he's, you know, he inhabits the kind of, I guess, an elite position in contemporary Beninois society. And there's still that part of him which is, you know, is lost, but he doesn't seem broken. And then you have this other character who actually, between the two characters, I find myself so much drawn to this other character who's portrayed alongside his father, right? And the father actually, I mean, the roles almost seem reversed. The child seems to be even physically older, very pensive, withdrawn. And the father is so animated and lively. It's like a study in contrast. And he's in his 50s, right? The child, and he talks about the mental instability and the tragedy of his life. And I wondered if you could say a little bit more about him and who he is, how you found him, and yeah, and how he came to. I was also fascinated by the fact that he was so open in his feelings. I think one of the things that is often difficult to talk about in societies globally, and this is also the case in many West African societies, is about mental health, right? And he's very open, and I wish you could tell us a little bit more about him.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the beginning, that I wanted to make him my main character, actually. You know, Zozo. Zozo was his name. And, you know, if you are making a film, you explore, you make your research, you get to meet the people, and then you realize he cannot be the character you want to have. A character need to be strong, need to someone who drives a story. But his story also affected me. And at the beginning, I thought he could be the person I want to take, you know, I would take back to Vietnam, right? And he insisted really, you know, to come with me, but I didn't have a mean for that, right? And he was in the need. He was the most, I mean, Christophe, as you said, you mentioned, Christophe is not poor. Christophe belonged to the elite in Benin. He could have bought his own ticket and go to Vietnam. But I mean, he never came to this idea to, you know, to go back to, you know, when I came there and then mentioned the fact that my plan was to take them to Vietnam, you know, they were so happy. But for the other person, Zozo was more, I mean, still now, I regret that I was not able to take him to Vietnam, because as you mentioned, he is this, I mean, he he's depressed. You can see that. He is, he is living in a kind of fantasy, and he refused the fact that he came back to Benin in his mind. He refused to be part of Benin. And this idea of being torn, being, stolen from what he believed is his country, Vietnam, destroy him, even his own family. He was not able to, to marry for a long time, to marry a woman for a long time because of this conflict, for instance. So, and he refused also to meet his father. He took everything that belonged to his mom from his father's room. And when I came to him, I said, my idea is to take you back to your father. He said, no, he even refused to call him my father. He said, I refuse to meet this guy. I'm done with this guy, like that. He destroyed me. He's everything. He's, responsible for everything I'm going through now. And then I met him many times to convince him that for the film and for him too, this step is important, to be able to overcome what he's going through, right? So that was, I imagine, the scene you see in the film is his first meeting after months of conflict with his dad, and you can see it. It was important for him. Also, I believe that what his father is saying, if his, he could understand the situation of his father, the manipulation they have been, victim of, the French manipulation, as you mentioned. These people, these men, African men, they were in love with Vietnamese women, true love. It's not just, what we know from soldiers' life. Most of them were in love. But at the end, when the war finished, they have been manipulated. Say, you cannot take these women at home. You have women in Africa. It's just a question of, for the army, it's a question of money, saving money. If you accept a woman in the ship, you need to pay for that. You need to pay in Marseille. You need also to pay, for the trip from France to Africa. So they didn't want to pay for that. So the only thing they know, they create, a reason, to avoid spending money for women. It was like that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think just to sort of conclude, I think that it just shows the kind of richness of what you're able to accomplish in this film, that you are, you're on the one hand, you're looking at sort of this encounter between two colonized populations, the kind of anti-colonial education in many ways that West African men receive from the Vietnamese freedom fighters. And then this sort of the intimate encounter between, Beninois and other men and Vietnamese women, the children, but also these questions of mental health. And it's really a deeply complex film. And so thank you for making it. And as I said, it's a film that I teach in 2 of my classes. And it's really important in the context of the race, sex, and colonialism course, because again, it decenters this notion that the only kind of relationships that the colonizing powers were concerned about were that between the colonized and the colonizer. They were also very much concerned about, how their own colonial subjects interrelated with one another. So it's just been fantastic. So thank you. So let's talk about America Street. And I think maybe as a way into this film, which I have to say is kind of, when you watch it today, it's kind of haunting in a way, because you made it in the wake of Walter Scott's killing, but before the Emmanuel Church massacre, right? And so you take us inside that church. We hear Reverend Pinckney, and it's and to know what comes after, right, is very haunting. And then to know that the film just continues, that what you document in the film continues over and over again. And it wouldn't, it came when it comes out this summer, right? We are living through yet another horrific police execution of George Floyd, right? And it's not to somehow say, one could say, wow, the timing of the two events, but of course not. It's not about timing, because these murders are always happening. Anytime you release this film, it's always going to be relevant, because you're dealing with something that is ongoing in American society. But what I'd like to do is have you take us back to your early days in Charleston, before you could have ever imagined that somehow you would be engaged in documenting the Walter Scott killing, and how you found Joe, and how in certain way he became a way for you to make sense of your own positionality as a West African in Charleston, with all of the history that's embedded in the city.
I mean, one of the aspects, I used to live in Charleston from 2013 and 2015. And what struck me when I first came to this city is the African, the African culture that's still present in the city, the connection of the city to Africa, right? And then when I got to know how the role of the city in the in the slavery, during the slavery, I have to to recall that Charleston has been one of the important port of slave, of slave port in the United States. That 40% of African American in North America have their ancestor came through the port of Charleston, right? Imagine that there was a time in Charleston where where you have more blacks than white in the city. You can imagine the role, obviously. So you still have, the people I met in Charleston, the people I saw, you still see these African faces, Africa in their face, in the face of these people, right? So that was my first something that's interpret you when you first came to the city and say, wow, okay, that could have been somewhere in Senegal or in Guinea or in Benin, right? And then when I got to understand the tension, how present, how segregated the city was still, right? And I thought there was a film to be done there, So I think the most important motivation, I was aware really about what is happening in the United States, about the tension, racial tension in the United States. But Charleston gave me the opportunity to analyze from inside the conflict that people, that just the demonstration or all these movement was not able to tell, because all what we see nationwide here is kind of symptom of what is happening inside the society. So I was looking for ways to tell this story, to make it visible, this conflict, this tension, this inside tension. So I knew the city, that was the city that can allow me to tell this story, this conflict, this, but you need a character for a film. And for about a year, I was not able to start shooting because I didn't have a character until I met Joe Watson. And I had a short conversation with him. And I looked at this corner store And I decided that was the place. That was really the way, the character that kind of allowed me to analyze the situation without knowing where my film is taking me to, without knowing what will be the conflict. I mean, the line, the story direction I would take, but knowing that you have a character who was able to collaborate, and not any any character, but a special character like Joe. He's intelligent, and his dedication to the society, to his community, and knowing also how important his community was, and how important his corner store it was for the community. Imagine that everything that happened in the community, Joe was the first person to be informed. And anything that happened in this community, which corner store received first the information. So I knew that I have the community when I got I got Joe.
So just as one observation is thinking of this kind of through line about relationships between mothers and sons, it's also, very, very strong in this film, the role of Joe's mother in his life and his dedication to her. And really that what he saw himself doing was carrying on her work in the community. And so I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the first topic we talk about when I first met Joe, that was his mom, because you cannot spend 1 minute without seeing him mentioning his mom. Mom was mom. So I understood that. I mean, that's why you can see that was also the reason why I started the story, my film, with the story around the mom, because he believed he became what he is because of his mom. He believes his mom is still there, is still hunting him. Everything. I mean, it's really important. You can see there's the one scene I was not able to edit in the film. There was a small book in the corner store, and the book belonged to his mom. Everything that Joe says, he take note of that, because mom want him to do so. Mom did the same thing. So he continued that. And everything, even the small things he's selling, for $1, he mentioned this in the book. And that was very, very important for me to see the connection between Joe and his mom. And he never changed anything in the room since his mom passed. Anything, I mean, the decor, all you see, the props inside the store, has been made by his mom. And he put everything the way it is. So that was important. I mean, being an African, having also, this connection, to mom, and that affect, attract my attention. And I thought, I cannot tell this story without, giving a space to this mom, to Joe's mom, right? And also that was the way for me to emphasize on the role of African American women in the community, like Charleston.
Thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about the moment of Walter Scott's killing and sort of what that meant for the community, and what it meant for you to kind of be there as a witness, and as a person who had at that point made Charleston their home, right? Because at that point, you're not an outsider, right? You're living in the community, you're bearing witness to something through your filmmaking, but you're also now becoming part of this community, and what that moment was like for you. Because let's see, I think that happened maybe the third or fourth year you had been living in the US.
Yeah, yes, yeah, that was in 2004. 15, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, before Walter Scott, there were many other killings nationwide. And for me, the importance of the killing in Charleston was like, you know, taking the film or giving the film another dimension, right? And because we have been talking about structural racism. We have been talking about segregation and education and all the problem, that's affected the African American community. And then when the killing happened, that was like bringing in the film uh, an example, a consequence of what the society is going through. Yeah, because I mean, the killings alone is nothing, doesn't say anything. And what I've been talking is also, I couldn't have an example to connect. And that gave me, the possibility to connect between the real suffering and the consequences of that, right? So that's why, my idea was to stay in the corner store, to finish the entire film in the corner store. When the killings happened, I gave myself this freedom to go out because that's part of the film. I decided that it's part of the film. It's part of the film. You cannot ignore, as a filmmaker, you cannot ignore this part, this very important consequences, drama of a film. Also, same thing with the church, right? We have been talking about racial, division and how to get together, right? How to, restart another, how to do another beginning, to give a chance to peace. And then what happened after that, bring us, to the beginning, right? Right. The king itself, so that's for me, that was really important, because if you know the reason why Walter Scott got killed, he got killed because he's running away from the police. And he's running away from the police because he feared that he will return to the prison, because he's missing paying his child support. So that's what my film was about. That's what we've been talking about in the corner store. And Joe is talking about his own situation, about his own conflict between his mom and his dad. So, how could I ignore this aspect that someone got killed because he's, I've been talking about, structural racism, how people can, can go to prison because of child support. How can you send people to prison because they're missing paying, right? So that's the consequence of that. How things are connected. Sorry. Okay.
No. I was just gonna say, I think that both, Walter Scott's killing and then later what happens at Mother Emanuel really revealed the obscenity and the perversity of American society, that actually it's possible to be making a film and have these kinds of catastrophic things happen, which perfectly illustrate, what you're trying to do in the film, that these kinds of things just keep happening over and over again, is just illustrates something obscene about white supremacy and about, the endemic nature, the quotidian nature, the everyday nature of anti-Black racism in US society. And then I also, because this wasn't something that I realized until I had got to the very end of the film. There's a young community activist who is featured in your film, and he becomes, you kind of first meet him in the wake of Walter Scott killing, and we see him throughout, a highly articulate young man talking about the kind of nature of the prison industrial complex, and of the kind of rampant, and he has a partner too who's also featured in the film, and she talks about the school to prison pipeline, and he also ends up being killed. And I wondered if you might say a little bit more about him as well.
Yeah, I mean, Muhyiddin was one of the really young, promising, a young man in Charleston. As he mentioned it also in the film, in Charleston, we still have this legacy of slavery, right? We still have, kind of youth that doesn't dare really to demonstrate, right? So for me, Muhyiddin, to contrast with Joe's character, that Joe belong to this older generation that have a more soft way to context, to protest, and Muhyiddin, for me, bring this difference of view, right, and a different of perspective, and also of strategy of fighting racism. It's a more confrontative, right? That's that. For me, I decided to take in my film to show this contrast between the two characters. And he was really, for everyone in Charleston, he was kind of hope, and he succeeds really through the killing, from after the killing of Walter Scott, to organize young people in Charleston from different races, to organize the Black Lives Matter, to local Black Lives Matter chapter, right? And then sadly, he got killed in New Orleans. Not by the police, but by another black man, right? And randomly, right? There was no conflict. He just visited the city, visit parent there, and there was a killing. There was a crazy guy who was just, shooting, and he got killed. He got killed really from a very, very banal, wound. He passed away. I was really sad to hear that. He got killed in 2018, and many people who fought for justice, are sad to hear his passing, right? So what was your question?
No, I was really struck by that note at the end of the film, and
I wanted to
more. But I mean, I think that brings us back to some, this other kind of question that that America Street doesn't sort of shy away from, which is, but does so with a compassionate eye, because Joe is such a compassionate human being, which is to really kind of look at some of the, the kind of the way in which the social fabric of the community has become frayed because of the economic downturn, because of the lack of opportunity, because of lack of good education for all, right? I mean, you follow, Joe into the charter school that, he is supporting and serves, I think, as a kind of advisor. But the film doesn't shy away from, questions of drug and alcohol abuse within the community, doesn't sort of shy away from the kind of internal conflicts that are happening there. And Joe is this kind of person who is interesting because he doesn't, he doesn't judge. He doesn't seem to judge, right? He seems to be able to see all of the people who come into his shop, whether it's young men who are coming in looking for Philly blunts to roll joints, or you know, the elderly man, or he seemed elderly, who was clearly high, and you know, who was asking for food, and Joe pulls out his own stash of food and says, you know, take this. And he has this way of kind of, you know, explaining the cause of these problems, but he doesn't judge. And I found that to be interesting, and I found it quite beautiful that in a way your film also doesn't, there's a strong statement about the structural conditions that produce this, but it doesn't sort of judge the ways in which people differently respond to that. But I wondered, you know, in your private conversations with Joe, how he kind of struggled, because clearly he's wanting to see positive change, and how he thinks about, you know, he says, I don't really want to sell these, you know, these cigars, because I know the young men are going to cut the papers and roll joints with them, and that doesn't make me feel good. So he feels this conflict as well.
Yeah, I mean, Joe is, he still believes that he can convince, he's able, you cannot fight, I mean, you cannot fight without, fight against racism without involving the other part, I mean, the white community. He still believes that this fight need to be done together, right? Not just, you know, you cannot decide that the other part is the enemy and then, you know, and fight alone. So that's a big difference between Joe and Mohideen, for instance. Mm-hmm. Joe believed that he can convince the mayor, for instance, the mayor that's who many people, many of my characters decided he's, I mean, think that is racist, and his politics has been racist for 35 years, and we don't hope that anything can change with this mayor. And Joe think the contrary, for think that, you know, that he need just to show him how his community is affected. And he believed that if the mayor and the people, I mean, the official of the city really understand what the Black community is going through, they will change, right? So yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, when I first came, I tried to contradict him. I have this discussion, which is not part of the film, to contradict him and say, no, these people have been there for, they have, they continue the legacy of slavery. They will never change. What you need to change is yourself, and you need to take power one day to be mayor. And he's not like that. I follow him many times to different organizations, I mean, different events where he has a long talk with the mayor, for instance, which would never happen with Mohideen. Mohideen is more confrontative, right? Confront the people and say, okay, but Joe is not like that, right? And even for gentrification, imagine how many people move to this neighborhood from many places, from New York, from the north, and instead of being aggressive toward these people, take them as part of the community. And at some point, there are some who really are regretting moving in the neighborhood, right? Because of the explanation of Joe, for instance. Each time when they come to, because we don't have only Black clients, he also had white clients. The newcomer in the neighborhood come also inside. So I witnessed many times that white clients, will leave $5 or $10 for the keep. At some point they understood that moving in this neighborhood mean also many communities are moving out.
Right.
I had a conversation with a white Joe's neighbor. Right, he was not part. He doesn't want to be part of the film, but have this private conversation. And he explained to me very well how he felt, really coming there. You are not aware of that. They were not aware of that. Coming from Boston, from New York, and so you are just looking for a place, a cheap place to buy, and being 9 months in in a good weather, right? So that was and what motivates many of them. But they didn't know that moving to Charleston, moving to this neighborhood, mean how many families, Black families, are moving out. And he understood that after a month, he realized what is happening. He's part of the problem.
Right.
So he already bought a house. So how do you deal with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we should work together. He understand that he should be accomplished, Joe's accomplished, accomplished, and then work together and see how they can develop what could be his participation in the fight.
Yeah. I have to say that the footage of the meeting in which the mayor comes to speak with the different members of the community, it's a fascinating encounter, because you have a number of the sort of senior Black figures in the community who are very animated and really forcefully making their points, and then you pan to these young white women who are busy, you're like thinking, what are they even doing there? They're like texting on their phone, totally different age. And it's amazing just to see that the only kind of recourse that the mayor has, he just repeats it over and over again, which is, diversity is Charleston's strength. If we're not diverse, we're not Charleston. And so, this is what, and just doesn't go beyond that, can't answer any questions substantively, because he has nothing beyond this kind of prepackaged line about diversity in Charleston. I'm just looking, we have actually, Amara Essay has a question in congratulating you on your film, and says, what really motivated you to make this film? And what is the place of the street in the film? Because I see you show several times the same street from the same perspective, such kind of coming back on the same point. So he wants to know what motivated you to make the film, or what really motivated you, and the place of the street in the film.
Yeah, I mean, my motivation is clear. I mean, I wanted to show how structural racism work, right? In a city, a very important city, historically important, like Charleston. And making this film also allowed us to understand nationwide here, or even worldwide, to understand how structural racism look like, right? So that's the most important motivation. And why should this street, America Street, and why the title America Street? That's also very important for me. My working title was different, and then during the process of making, I understood and heard that America Street, that Charleston was the only one city in the United States with a street called America Street. And then I realized I wasn't on America Street. America Street, for me, with what is happening nationwide, and not only in 2019, but in 2015, that was the same. It was the same. We were, this country has been, I mean, it's affected for the same thing. Nothing has changed since then. So I thought maybe calling the film America Street, bring it or push it to not only Charleston, but to different city, and I mean, to tell really the problem of around racism in the United States, right?
I often feel as a historian, when I go into the archives and I find these really incredible stories, I think to myself, like, not even the most imaginative mind can make up what happens in reality, right? So this notion of this street, it's like you couldn't you couldn't dream of making this film and kind of having this street named America Street, but in reality it is, and it so succinctly captures everything that you want to say. It's a kind of, you know, yeah, reality I think is always so much more rich than even our imaginations can be. That's really interesting.
Yeah, if I may, I know there will be a lot of, hopefully there will be a lot of questions, and there is actually a question, but I just wanted to add one thing that is to talk about, especially about, if I can go back to Indochina, what I find interesting is cinematically and in terms of your editing and cinematography, is that you start the film especially in the two cities, Hanoi and Cotonou. And then you see these, like the highways, the bridges, and the traffic. Yeah. And what is interesting, you see all these bikers and motorcyclists, and then the cars and the crowd. And but what is interesting, because at some point you'll be lost. Am I in Benin? Or am I in Cotonou, or am I in Hanoi? So that is one interesting part of your editing that I wanted just to highlight. But there was a scene that I really loved. Like the film is beautifully edited, well done. And so another one, congratulations, although I've seen it, you know, and we discussed it several times before. There's one scene that I thought was very beautiful when you showed Doug in Christophe in this public park. And he was talking, then he was just looking around. And then you showed these Vietnamese women who are exercising, but they're giving the camera their back. I mean, you're shooting them from back as if he was looking at them, because it just made me think, I mean, and I think that's probably goes through the mind of everybody look at it, is that any of these women could have been his mother.
His mother, yeah.
And I'm sure because he failed at the end. So yeah, to find the mother. Exactly. That is also interesting. But I wanted to move, if you have any comment on this, would be interesting in terms of how you edited the film and the cinematography itself.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, this scene, I mean, the documentary, you have you cannot decide, no decision. I mean, you cannot plan before, right? You take what is happening. I found myself in this place in Hanoi, and we were looking for a quiet place to make an interview, but that still carry also the atmosphere of the city. And then I discovered this place, this big, park, and I've been there, and we've been walking and try to figure out where we sit to make an interview. And then I realized that these two characters was exercising. And I thought, wow, okay, that could be the right place to do that, and to have this in background, and Christophe talking about his mom and seeing this old lady exercising, I can connect this with what he's saying, right? So that was a very simple decision you take, right? And you are somewhere and you use any, props, any, thing that the place they offer to you, So that was that. And then it came out that this scene, this exercise scene has a great meaning for what we have been looking for. Right.
Yeah. I wanted to, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, finish.
No, I want to come back to the connection between Vietnam and Cotonou. That was important. That was something I was, even before I traveled to Vietnam, I was really looking for how to connect the two cities, because I heard from different soldiers or veterans that when they first came to Vietnam, it looked like they were in Africa. That the weather was the same. And for some of them who were coming from West Africa, Senegal, they found a kind of connection They know the trees. It was the same environment for them. So they could connect easily to the people than the French, right? So that was for me very important to look after this element, how to connect it, water, bridges, and now the post-colonial chaos, which is the motorbike and so on, which we still have in Benin, and they still have in Vietnam, right? So we could connect this, we connect them, and in the past, also we connect also the post-colonial area, right? Which is the same.
Yeah, I would like to, Carina, if you want to invite the audience. I mean, sorry for that. Go ahead.
No, of course, we're happy to continue taking questions from the audience. I wanted to say that I had that very same, Salah, that very same reaction to the film of being kind of lost and not knowing what city I was in, what country I was in. And it evokes precisely what you're just saying, Idrissou, but also it took me back to one of the comments that comes up in the earlier part of the film about the way in which the topography, this tropical topography of Vietnam was so familiar to the men who were sent there to fight, right? That this was seen as a tactical advantage that they had over French soldiers, right? So, the way in which actually the French, try to use that to their advantage in this way, I thought was also very, very striking. And the other thing that, just going back to that scene in the park, there's a playfulness of especially of the woman who is holding the red, fans. She eventually turns her back, but she's quite engaged for some time in a kind of almost like a flirtatious, fun kind of manner. And so I wonder if you might just say a little bit about that kind of moment, whether you were sort of surprised at her level of engagement. I was tickled by it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we have been filming without, she didn't notice. she didn't know we were filming her, right? And at some point she realized that she'd been filmed. And then, she decided to play with, to play with us, right? So that's interesting, how camera is a magic, so I decided to use it, right? So, yeah, and after that, I got to meet her and have an exchange, and she said, no problem. I decided to tell, that's everyone we met in Vietnam. I always talk about the situation, why we are there, and why we are filming. That Christophe, you see a lot of sympathy from the people when they heard about Christophe's history. And one particular thing where I was so disappointed, or Christophe was disappointed, it's when we visited a museum in Hanoi. So, and that was one very simple scene, and but he was so disappointed and depressed by what happened there. This museum, Vietnamese people don't pay to go inside. And we, because we come from, from abroad, we need to pay. It's nothing, but we pay. It's a symbolic. So, and he refused to pay himself. He said, "Don't pay for me because I'm Vietnamese." And the guy in the front door say, "No, you need to pay." He need to pay. He said, "No, I'm Vietnamese. I don't pay." And there was a discussion. He was so, depressed by that, and then I explained to the guy, I explained why we are there. We came to make a film because Christophe's mom is a Vietnamese, and he said, "Oh, okay, but he need to pay." So he's, it's not about how much, but for Christophe, it was important for him not to pay.
The symbolism, it actually reminds me of some of the interactions that happened. My work is in Ghana, so I spend a lot of time at places like the Elmina and Cape Coast, quote unquote, castles, but where the slave trade was conducted. And it reminds me of the tensions that often happen when people from the diaspora come and are again faced with this kind of differential pay scale and expected, and this same kind of thing. But this is where I come from. Why am I being charged more? It's a kind of similar thing. So I have one last question, and I have to excuse myself because I am now 10 minutes late to a meeting that I'm supposed to be in. But which is, there's this really poignant scene where Christophe is spreading the ashes of a woman named Nicola, I think. And he calls back to Benin and he's speaking to somebody and he says, I completed I fulfilled her last wish to have her ashes scattered on the Mekong River. And it just made me wonder, one, who she is, but also two, what was the fate of the Afro-Vietnamese young girls who were to Benin as well? So we follow Christophe and Zuzu, but how many girls were there, and what was their fate in society in Benin?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, to come back to your question first, the first question, who was online on the telephone? That was one of the soldiers actually who was still alive, one of the veterans who know exactly Vietnam. He was in Vietnam. So Christophe is in contact with him. Christophe believe he played a very important role when he was a child. So he's in connection with him, and he just called him many times and to get help, right? Where to go to find the information. So that was this person was also a character in my film. That was the guy who brought 3 children, his own children, without the mom. So that was him. So there were many women, girls who were brought to Africa. And Christophe's father has 3 actually, 3 girls and four boys. So as you can see also in the film, one of the girls passed away a couple of months before we start shooting. That was also the reason why Christophe brought the ashes to Mekong. That was his sister. He's also half, right? He was also mixed race. She was mixed race. And she was married to a person in Madagascar. And they have many children in France. So she passed away in Madagascar and short before we start shooting. And they were also in France. Christophe's sisters, 2 sisters live in France. So that was why we couldn't film them. They were in France while we were filming in Africa. So, and I couldn't find a girl in Cotonou at the time we were filming. I knew there were 2 or 3 other girls in Cotonou, but the problem was the brother wanted to get money from me because of the film. He thought we brought a lot of money, and he refused to put me in touch with his sisters, and so I decided not to explore this part of my film.
Okay, so thank you so much, Carina, for your part, and we are really very grateful for all your questions and readings of the film and so forth. So thank you. Yeah. So yeah, what I will continue to invite the audience to ask a question. You have a colleague, before I ask another question, you have a colleague from Benin who say, hello, brother Idrissou. That is Aimer Essay. He's a filmmaker from Benin, living in Berlin, and he was saying, congratulations, but he was also saying what really motivated you to do this film, which is specifically the America Street. So I think you've answered it, but if you want to add something, that would be great. I think he asked a question earlier.
Yeah, what was the question again, Salah?
He said, what motivated you to make this film? And I think, and what is the place of the street in the film? Because I see you show several times the same street from the same perspective. Yeah, and I think you've answered that earlier, but if you want to add, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's he's a very nice brother from Berlin. We know each other very well. And yeah, Esther, thank you very much. And thank you for your question. And the motivation, I mean, it's very simple, right? And if you know what is happening here in the United States and the racial tension and also, I mean, there are two reasons. Let's say there are two reasons. My connection, the connection between Charleston and Africa, and also with what is happening around racial justice in the United States. That was that was the two reasons why I decided to make this film. You know, I became aware of the importance of Charleston for slavery when I lived there. I lived there for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there is a question for Guy Woti. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. He said, "Dear Idrissou, I love your films, especially Indochina on the Trace of a Mother, that I had the opportunity to show in Vietnam last year during my stay in Ho Chi Minh City and American Street. I love the poetics of your films. There is something really touching, nearly nostalgic in the way you move the camera, the way you frame, and the way you direct your actors. I wonder if you can tell me anything about your relationship to time and memory."
to memories.
To time and memory.
Yeah, time and memory. Yeah, that's really important. It's a great question. And it is a great question because I think we Africans, we have a problem with memories, with archives, for instance, right? But I understand why archives and memories are not, important right now for African countries. But it's sad, really. And right now we are struggling. We are struggling with different problems, with poverty, with health, and so many challenges African countries are suffering of. And that might be, I believe, the reason why we ignore this part of our life. And one of the reasons why I make Indochina was also that, really, to memorize, to go back into the history and bring back part of our past, right? Know what happened before, colonialism. It's very important to get to know what we suffered, from colonialism, right? So for me, this film is to remind us, we are Africans, to be able really to create, to construct, to have a vision for the future is very, very important to have. There are so many things I want to tell about archives here because of this film. The research aspect of the film, I was so disappointed to see how chaotic our African archives look like today. So we won't have time to discuss all these aspects today. It's another a big topic, really.
Yeah. I wanted to jump because of time. I'm still inviting the audience, and I feel like people should feel free to ask any question they want. But in the meantime, waiting for another question, there's something that occurred to me when we talk about the two colonized people came together via the colonial experience itself. But what is in our early discussions, many times when we met, is the interesting part is that how the Vietnamese, and I love these two interviews with the two generals who were part of the guerrilla warfare
Yes.
in the Viet Minh movement. Of course, the Americans came after the French were defeated, and then they faced the other side with the Viet Cong. So and then they end up like in with another also decisive battle where the Americans were also defeated. But what is interesting about that earlier confrontation, two colonized people found themselves, is that there is a whole other afterlife, a whole other history, where you see among these two political leaders, guerrilla fighters, highly educated intellectuals, and I forgot their name, but they're very important character. I wonder if you could say something about them. But then also, I want to tie up to this is something that I think in our discussion and in the film is that the Vietnamese from their side realize the difference between the French and the Africans who are fighting with them.
Exactly.
And they try to recruit them to their side.
Yeah.
And of course, here you have socialists, mostly people who are influenced by the anti-colonial struggle and recruiting. And I know this may be giving something of your next project, giving away your next project is that one of your new project is actually will be fictional, unlike the earlier one, which are documentary, but it's based on a character that was real, because many of these returnees from these Africans who went back, they came with a new consciousness and they became part of the anti-colonial
colonial movement. Exactly. Yeah.
Anti-colonial movement. And one of them is this character that you're pursuing in the context of Guinea. But there was also, you mentioned to me in Tunisia, sorry, in Morocco specifically, there was a very well-known, became a part of the trade unionism. So if you could say or highlight that, that would be interesting. But I want to just know, how did you get to know these two guys and how did you connect with them? The two general,
I mean, the two colonels of the Vietnamese army, they were very old, and they became writers, both of them. That's why it was easy for me to get to know them. Everyone in Vietnam know them, right? So, but the connection has been made by a former ambassador of Vietnam in France. He was ambassador from France, Mr. Tai. Mr. Tai was an ambassador of Vietnam in France and in Luxembourg and Belgium. So I got to meet him in France. So I told him my plan to make a film, to come to Vietnam to make a film. And he said, oh, no problem. I mean, I will be there. And when you got there, I will connect you with different people you need. So that was easy for me when I came to Hanoi, and the first door I was looking for was to meet Mr. Tai. And met him. I knew I have everyone in Vietnam, so the connection was, it was going very easy, with him. And so that's really interesting, because this narrative in Vietnam, especially among this older generation, was interesting. They were all aware of what happened during the war, in contrary to the narrative in France. While preparing this film, I got to meet all the French officers who were still alive and who were very influential for Africans in Vietnam. I got the contact, through the Ministry of Defense Ministry, and I met them to prepare myself. I want to know what happened there. Right. So one point all these people tried to attract my attention to was, don't go there. They hate Africans, right? So this come often in their conversation in France, how Vietnamese people, they hate Africans. But once in Vietnam, I realized that was completely fault. It was a makeup by the French. This narrative work also has worked during the war. That's they try to fight against the fact that Africans are the conversion, to fight conversion, you need to oppose the people, to oppose them, to say, these people hate you, they will kill you. Okay, don't go there, don't go, don't connect with them, don't talk with them because they want to kill you, right? So that's in a version of a story I got to know once in Vietnam, right? That's how the colonized people were very, very connected, and how this important figure, like Mr. Ngog, like Colonel Dang, they are the two characters you see in the film, how they were involved in converting Africans, for instance, during the war, right? And one very interesting story is about a Moroccan Union guy whose name was Maruf. And Maruf was in Morocco. He was a communist, a communist from Morocco. So he has been sent by the Union, from Moroccan Union, to convert African fighters in Vietnam. And that was very interesting. And how the fighter in Vietnam recruited Maruf, and not only Maruf, and they also asked after support by by the Moroccan anti-colonial fighter. I forgot him. Salah, you must know his name.
Mahdi Ben Barka?
No, in the Abdelkrim.
Okay.
No,
I don't know.
Abdelkrim was Abdelkrim. Yeah, Abdelkrim was his name. Was a anti-colonial fighter. He has been expelled by the French, by colonizer, to Egypt. And in Egypt, the Vietnam army has connected to him in Egypt. And through the radio of Cairo, he was able to to talk to African soldiers in Vietnam, right? To say, to convert them, to make them aware of this, situation, being colonized. That's Vietnam. This war is not them. Their war. It's not. They are fighting in the bad. Among
cause.
Yeah, for the bad cause, for instance. So that was really important. And what people don't talk about also is how many Africans changed the camp. And as you mentioned, also one of the characters in my film, not the film, of a project I'm working on right now,
that's what we wanted to know about your new film. Yes.
Yes, it's a real character who was very important. He was a colonel. He became a colonel in the Vietnamese army, and he was a French soldier who became a colonel in Vietnam army. He was from Guinea, actually, right? So, and I call him Ganda but his true name was Zauro. Colonel Zauro from Guinea is well known in Vietnam. Everyone who is older than 70 years in Vietnam know him, know who is Colonel Zauro, know who is Maruf, right? Who's Abdelkrim, right? And so that's, I was really surprised to discover this part of history, right, in Vietnam. I've been invited also at the University of Hanoi at the time, because there are so many documents we are not aware of, and one professor, history professor, showed me so many and told me, that he's looking for Africans, students who want to write a PhD on African history to work on with this document. So that's really part of my trip. That was not part of my, while filming, I also got to meet people who were not part of my film because it was interesting for me to get to know more about the history.
Okay, the last question, I guess, is, because we are almost running, we ran out of time, actually, we extended it, which means people are interested, how you are selecting characters for your film and how you make them or him, as he said here, to speak in front of camera.
I mean, I don't, the character, a documentary character is you are not looking for a character, you are looking for a person with history, a person with insight, right? And you meet a person and then you say, that is a person with an individual story, with a personal story. And the other part of the film is now, it's to give your story let's say, I always, for me, all my story are in two. They have a context, the bigger part of the story, and the individual story. Like you see in Joe's, you have Joe's personal story, and you have the bigger one, the context, which is segregation, racial justice, gentrification, and school education of Black kids, and so on, right? So, but within this context, you have a very personal story. You see also for Christophe, for Indochina, we have a context, the war, two colonized meeting, and post-colonial chaos. And you have Christophe who is looking for his mom. So I don't say, my conversation with my character, I don't call it interview, it's a conversation. It's the people who you meet want to know that you have kind of empathy for them, for their life. They want to know, it's not your film, they don't care about your film, they care about you. You being interested in their story and being there to hear what they have to say. This personal connection to your character make the film, right? So I don't have a list of questions that say, sit here and tell me. That's not how I proceed. For me, is I meet someone, I meet an interesting person, and I show my empathy and to the life of these people. And if they want to make sure that you are interested. You are not just there. You are not there just to get your images, to get your, the responses of your question and go back and make an interesting film. No, it's not how I proceed. I'm, connected to my character and forever, beyond the film, right?
Well, thank you so much. There's a lot of questions, and now there is a guy wrote and sent another question. Briefly, I've just asked you for a few seconds, maybe because we really run out of time.
Okay.
And we're really grateful. But Guy said, did you have the opportunity to show the Indochina, the trace of a mother in Benin or in other African countries? So if you can just answer that. He has other things that I've forwarded to you because it's really about the position of the African filmmaker and thinking strategically about the future of African filmmaking, which is really will take us beyond the time. But the first question is interesting. The reception of the film, or if you showed it in Benin, very briefly.
Yeah, Indochina has been screened in different places in Africa. It has been screened in Ouagadougou and in Benin, where I come from, many times in Benin. And so I don't have an opportunity to show it in other places. And I showed the film in Egypt, for instance, in Egypt, and also in Algeria and Tunisia also. So in these places, the film has been screened. But other African places, maybe in Cameroon, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think in Cameroon during the African Film Festival in
And how is it received? It would be just interesting to say.
Yeah, really interesting. With a lot of debate, really. That was, I mean, especially in Benin. I was not there, but I got. I've been informed about what happened, you know, because Christophe was part of a conversation, which is that it's interesting because many people know Christophe in Benin, but they don't know his the history, you know, around his personal life. They don't know where he comes from. They don't know he carries so much, you know, a part of our, you know, history, right? So I think Christophe, after these screenings, is now seen, I mean, differently, right? So that's actually why such films are interesting, right? If it can change the way people look at other people, the way people look at themselves, so that's then we reach our goal.
Yeah. Okay. And just to say, like, what is happening with the new project, and if you have a title for it yet, the film itself, and what stage? As a lot, yeah.
My new project,
yes, yeah.
That calls a corporaganda. Corporaganda is a corporal, like a corporal, as you know, his
military
rank, his military rank, right? And he's my main character in this project, who was in Vietnam to fight the Vietnamese, right? And realized that he was not at the right place, right? And because he also had a wife, a Vietnamese wife, and a child, and who he was not able to see because of the fact that he's been manipulated by the French army, and he refused to, I mean, to go back to Africa, and decide to go into the jungle to look after his children and his child and his wife. So during this journey, and he got kidnapped by the Vietnamese, right? And there's so many things happen in the jungle, and he finally got to meet his wife and his kid, and decide to fight for the Vietnamese, right? So that's.
So, thank you so much, Idrissou, and thanks, Carina. Yeah.
Great.
It's really a pleasure to have you and to have your insights in the making of these two great films. And we wish you luck with the new film. I know production is a major issue, and support for it in the context of Africa but we wish you luck for that, because that would be your first fictional one, which would be really great. And we're all looking forward to seeing it. So thank you so much, and thanks to all our audience.
Thank you.
Who have been very patient and actually stayed all through. Many among them are very old friends, and I'm grateful to all of them. So thank you so much, Idrissou. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you very much.
I also thank all the staff of Sat'an, Sharif, and others, BJ, who remain with us in supporting the technical, production of this webinar. So thank you, and have a good evening. And I mean, it's evening here, but have a great day.
In
Africa. Okay. Bye-bye.